Welcome, friends. Today we're going to learn how to paint a deer at sunrise. This is an acrylic painting. You will need red, yellow, blue, black, and white. Optional colors that are helpful are brown, pink, and orange. You do need tape for this painting, either painter's tape or scotch tape. Paintbrushes, it would be helpful. You can use anything, but having a large round, a medium flat, and a small brush are helpful. And really, you can use any size canvas. There are multiple steps in this painting, and the first one is taping the trees and horizon line. First thing we want to do is tape off our trees. Now, if you don't have tape, you can use a pencil, okay, and just draw them out. And clear scotch tape works, but I'm going to use the blue painter's tape. That way you can see it, because it's much easier for you to see on your screen if I do blue painter's tape. So let's take a look at what we're doing. Let me grab my painting again. So do you see all of these trees here? That's where the tape is going. What we're going to do is when we put tape there, then we can paint our beautiful sunrise and not paint over the trees. Okay? So I put 3 trees on my first one. I don't know how many I'm going to do right now. We're going to kind of figure this out as we go. So you can decide how many trees you want. And if you want your trees to be fatter, you can just put 2 pieces of tape next to each other. So I'm going to take my tape and I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to wrap it all the way over the edge, and then I'm going to bring it down and I'm just pulling it down, and this right here is going to be my first tree. Now, as I'm putting in trees, whether you put in 1 tree or 50 trees, okay, I don't recommend 50, but no matter how many trees you put in, I do recommend that we're going to leave the middle space with no trees, because that's where we're going to put our deer, okay? So leave that middle space with no trees. Now, what if I want to make a fatter tree, kind of a thicker tree? So I'm going to do kind of a thicker tree next to this tree, and I'm going to do that by doing 2 pieces of tape. Now, each tree, we want them to end at different points, so they all wrap over the top, but they're going to stop at different points in the bottom. Okay, so after you have the trees, the next step is to decide where your horizon line is. So for all of the kiddos who are joining us today, the horizon line is the distance. That's where we're going to see the sunrise. And so we need to be above the bottom of the trees, because it wouldn't make sense to have a tree floating in outer space, just floating in the middle there. So somewhere above the highest tree, we're going to do 1 more line, and that's your horizon. And we want to tape that as well. So I'm just going to tape straight across. That is my horizon line. And I'm bringing it all the way around both edges of my canvas. All right. Now we want to pick up the biggest brush we have, and we're going to make that sunrise. And that sunrise is going to start at the piece of tape that's the horizon line, and we're going to go from light to dark, and we're going to arc over as we go. And we're going to mix our colors as we go. So for example, we're going to start with some white, but we're going to quickly add yellow to that white, and then to the yellow we're going to add some orange, and then to the orange we're going to add some pink. And if you don't have orange and pink, that's okay, because yellow and red make orange, and red and white make pink. And then we're just going to keep mixing that up into red and to blue. Okay, and I'm going to do that with you just now, but that's the path we're about to journey on. You get to choose where your sun's shining. I'm going to put my sun right here, peeking out from the middle of the trees. So that's where I'm going to start with my arc. So here I have the biggest brush I have, and we're not going to wash our brush. Okay, we're not going to wash our brush. I'm starting with white, which I know is the same color as your canvas, but then right over that white, I'm going to get some yellow. And notice how my brush stroke is like a rainbow, okay? Our brush stroke is the texture of our painting. So we want to make sure that we're consistent for this painting and this design. In different areas, we're going to use different brush strokes. Now this is why we have the tape, because we're just going to paint right over the tape like it's not even there. So I had orange, or excuse me, I had yellow. Now I dipped a little bit in orange. So this is kind of a yellowy orange. And I'm letting those colors really blend together. And I'm pretending like my tape isn't there. And now I'm going to go to orangey orange. And I'm going to just keep mixing it and blending it. And you can go back and forth over those colors as much as you want. I'm going to bring a little bit more yellow in there. If the background looks thin, we can go ahead and do a second coat. I'm noticing mine looks a little thin this morning. After orange, we're going to mix in pink. And I know I'm going a little fast, but I'm going to go back over it again. That pink looks really bright. So I'm going to just bring in a tiny bit of white when I'm blending that pink and that orange. And if you picked up colors from me, this is the exact same one that you're using. And if you have your own colors, just kind of step back and be like, is that dark enough or is that too dark? Because now we're going to go into the red. And you can bring your sunset or sunrise, let's do a sunrise, all the way up to the top, or you can transition to blue pretty fast. So I'm going to talk through that again. We started with the lightest color, which is white, and then we went white into yellow immediately, and then we added some orange, so we had yellow and orange, and from yellow and orange, we're going into orange and pink, and at that point, it was a little too bright for me, so I added some white, and that's completely up to you. I do have the attitude towards painting that my job is to show you the steps that I'm doing, and then your job is to choose what you want to do. Okay? So if you want to try something fun that I didn't mention, go ahead. I'm never going to be like, that's not what I said. Because I think experimenting with paint and with color is so fun, so important. So I went from my pink into my red. And now I get purple. And I did not mention purple, did I? That's because I'm just going to take my blue and go right into my red. And that's going to make a purple. Now, I also noticed, just like my pink, that purple is fairly dark. And that's an easy solution. We can just add a little bit of white on top of that. So we're going from red to purple. And then from purple, we'll go into blue. All right, so filling in the rest of the top with blue, and then even the edges, the top edge and the side edge, until we have one big, beautiful sunrise. Okay, so we ripped the tape off, just that one piece, and it created a straight line. So even though we have that crisp, perfect line, when you go back and forth, we're going to have strokes that go horizontal, go back and forth. I want you to actually come up to the line and just over it just a little bit. We don't need it to be that crisp line anymore. We want it to be soft, soft snow. So we're going to use mostly white and just a touch of another color. I planned on using yellow, but a little bit of pink got into my white. So I'm going to have a little bit of pink in mine. And I'm just going back and forth, filling that white into the whole space. Just the tiniest little bit of yellow on my paintbrush. And back and forth, letting them all kind of mix together. So I have stripes of white, tiny stripes of yellow. Beautiful, peaceful morning. You know, as we get away from the sun, it's not going to be quite so bright. So I might pick up the tiniest little bit of blue or black, just the tiniest little bit for my edges. But again, it's always mostly white. Lots of white. See how I mixed in a little bit more color? But it's just the tiniest little bit. If you feel like you picked up too much of a color, that's okay, because you can go over it with more white. And again, just like with the top, we're going over those pieces of tape just like nothing is there. We're painting them over, going over the edge, just the tiniest bit so it's not so crisp. Bringing it in really close so that you can see kind of the variations in how there's a little bit of yellow on the bottom, a little bit of black, but it still looks white. If anybody was to look at the bottom, they'd say that's snow. So in order to make the shadow of the trees, we want to look at our light source. And our light source is right here. Wherever your sun is shining. Maybe you put it on the side. Maybe you put it on the other side. Wherever your sun is shining, that's your light source. So I can take my brush and go to the center of my light source and point to the bottom of a tree, and it's going to show me where the shadow is going from that tree. And actually the light source, I'm going to take back the center because the light source really is this whole ball. So I'm going to go from the light source, this big yellow area, and I'm going to take my paintbrush from that area to my tree, and I'm going to point from my brush from the light source to the bottom of the tree. And then do you see where my paintbrush is going? That's your shadow. So I can do that with every tree. I can do it with this tree over here. That will be my shadow. I can do this tree way over here. That's my shadow. So let me show you what I'm talking about in my example painting. See how the shadows are going away from the light source? So this is our first opportunity to mix on our plate. On my plate, I'm going to mix black. Let's do a little bit of blue or brown. A little bit of any color. Just pick up a tiny bit of color. And then again, we're going to pick up white. And I'm going to mix kind of a grayish color. And the reason we're not just doing black and white is by adding a third color, it gives it more a realistic or more organic feel to it. So I'm just mixing in, now I'm mixing in a little bit of brown. Just kind of mixing in a shadow color. We don't want it to be terribly, terribly dark, but it is a lot darker than the snow. So this beautiful gray color that we're mixing, we're going to start with the trees that are farthest away from the sun. So the ones on the outside. And I'm going to take my paintbrush again, and I'm going to kind of look from the middle, look from the light source to the bottom, and I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to go, oh, my shadow is going to go about here, away from the sun. And then I'm just going to go back and forth, just little tiny lines, and make that shadow go away. And in this case, because we're on the edge, it's going to go right off the edge and around the corner of my canvas. So let me walk you through that again. So we mix our gray color, and I'm looking at the light source, and I'm going to go from I'm going to take my paintbrush and just kind of eyeball it from the light source to the trunk. It's right about there. So I can see that the shadows can go this way. So I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, and I'm going to paint right over. In this case, there was a tree next to it. I'm just going to paint right over it. And you want to stay about the same thickness as the paint, or excuse me, as the tape, as the tree. So now I'll go to this tree, and I'm going to walk through this step each time I do it. So I'm going to find my light source. I'm going to find the corner of the tree that's closest to the light source. I'm going to hold it up, and I notice that this shadow will just kind of go right like this. And I'm just making little tiny, tiny lines back and forth. I'm not making them perfect. I'm not crisping up the edges. I'm just going back and forth. And I'm also not overthinking it. Just kind of making lines that go away. So these. Now I can go to the other side. Let me move my painting over a little bit. And I see my tape. It's hard to see because I painted it so much, but this is my farthest away piece of tape. And there's the light source, and I see my shadow is going to go way this way. Because a shadow is where the light cannot get through, right? That's what a shadow is. The light cannot get through, and that's what a shadow is. And so I'm just painting. And my white, my snow, is still a little wet. That's pretty cool because it's kind of blending it in a little bit more. Okay, so there's another tree. I find my light source. I find the outside of the tree, or the part of the tree that's closest to the light source. Kind of line them up, and I see that my shadow is just going to kind of go this way. There it goes. And I'm just making little tiny, tiny marks back and forth, away from my light. All right, I have one more kind of big tree, but I ran out of paint. So I'm going to mix some black with some brown. I think I put a tiny bit of blue if I remember right, and some white. And there we go. There's a similar gray color. And there's my light source. Now it looks like these shadows are going to end up, this is my biggest tree because I used two of them close together. Let's see, I'm just eyeballing. I'm using my paintbrush as a guide, but I know it's not going to be perfect. I'm okay with that. And this one's going to go right up next to the other one. Oh my goodness, it's right on top of it. They kind of blend together. That's okay. Because if this was a real aspen grove, there would be trees overlapping all over the place. So now I have my shadows going away from my light source. Right? Every snowflake, every person, every deer are slightly different. So we're all going to follow the steps. And if there's anything that you want to do a little bit differently, or if you're trying and it doesn't quite look just the same, that's okay because every deer is a little bit different. You can decide, depending on how your trees are laid out, where you want your deer to be. I'm looking at my previous example, and I'm thinking I'm going to put my deer right about here. Okay, now you could put it in the front. It doesn't have to be all the way in the back, but just an example I used, it was probably 3 fingers from the horizon line. So I'm just going to do that again. So to do that, we're going to pick up black, just pure black, not mixed with anything. And we're going to start, and I'm going to weight each step of the deer to make sure that we all got it. But we're going to start with, how do I describe the shape? It's like an oval, but it's bigger on the left side. So watch me first. I'm going to go wherever I want the body of the deer, which I'm going to put in the sun. I'm going to make kind of this oval shape, but the left side is a little bit bigger. The left side is the chest of the deer. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. So we're just going for a round shape that's kind of flat on the top, not too, but on the bottom, one side is bigger than the other. And the side that's bigger is the side that's going to have the deer's head. And I'm doing that on the left side. If you feel like doing it on the right side, that's okay. So here's that body we're making right now. This thumb shape, you can fill it in. So for this next shape, this is the head. We're going to the very edge of the fatter part of your ovalish thing, and we're going up and out just a little bit, arcing over, around, and then mimic the same on the way down because that's the neck. And to me, kind of reminds me of that thumb. And then once you have that shape, you can just fill it in. If you notice anything looking maybe too thin, you can always add just a tiny touch. Want the neck to move, or the head to move smoothly into the neck, and the neck to move smoothly into the back. We have our ears next, and they're going to be on the side of the head. So they're at the top, but also on the side, because there needs to be plenty of space for our antlers. So we're at the top side of our thumb. And we're going to make long, skinny, almost like leaves or almonds. So I'm going to take my pointed paintbrush, and I'm going to go out to the side. You know, they also remind me of Yoda ears. And we're going to go out to the side, making these long ears that point on the sides. I'm going to do that on both sides, because we need to leave room for the antlers. Long and skinny. And then, so to sharpen your paintbrush, because paintbrushes are made out of bristles, and bristles separate sometimes. And so to sharpen our paintbrush, you just put it on the side of a surface, and then you twist and pull. And what that does is if your paintbrush ever starts to come apart, if the bristles ever flare out, then you can just twist and pull it down, and it's going to suck all those bristles back together so that your paintbrush is pointy again. In the example I did, it was a fairly large deer. It was a 3-point buck. So here's my fairly large deer going towards the outside with our sharpened paintbrush. And we're just going to arc around to the top point of our antlers. The very top antler, the highest antler. Then we're going to build off of that. We can decide how many to do after that point. So now I have just one antler. Oh my goodness, I feel like I made it very big. This is going to be a very regal deer here. And then I can go on the other side. And I'm going to try to mimic it, like mirror image, so the opposite. Just following those lines around. Okay, that reminds me of some kind of gazelle, because it just has one antler, one point on each antler. Now, once you have the main antlers, the main trunk, now we can work off of that and add as many as we want. So I would always start at where the antlers meet the head and follow your original antler, and then when you're ready to break off, then you can curve towards the inside. So let me show you. I'm starting at the head, and I'm following that same antler, and I'm getting to right about here, and I'm like, you know what? I'm ready for another one. And I'm going to just curve and break off. Just like that. And I'm going to do that on both sides because we want them to be mirror images of each other. So I'm going to start at the bottom, curve up, and break off. Check that out. So now I have a 2-point buck. But I'm going to go for a 3-point buck again. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to follow my antlers up. I'm going to go in between that one and the top one. And I'm going to arc towards the middle. And I'm going to do a 3-point buck. And I'm going to stop there. But if you feel like doing more, go for it. So same thing, other side. Starting at the bottom, following it through, and then somewhere in the middle, kind of mirror image of the other side, I'm arcing towards the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and put some legs on my deer. I'm going to go from the front of the body, and I'm going to draw my first leg. I'm going to give it skinny legs with little knobby knees because they have long, skinny legs. And I'm going to go forward, and then I'm going to bend it back. And I'm going to have one leg bending a little bit more than the other leg. And then at the end, I'm going to add kind of like just a little squarish shape that is the hoof. Just adding like a little square. So I'm stepping back. I'm noticing that looks a little too skinny, a little funny. So I'm going to go over it just to make it a little bit thicker. Not much. There's my leg, bending forward, and then going back, because that's a front leg. Now, the other front leg is next to it, but my deer is going to be standing on this front leg, so it's going to be almost straight. And because my deer is standing on it, he's standing on it, it's going to come down a little bit farther because it's not bent. And again, if you feel like doing your own legs, or if you already did it, totally fine. Adding a little hoof at the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to do my back legs, and they have thicker hind legs because they're really good jumpers. So I'm going to make the top of the back legs a little bit thicker. A little bit thicker. And then we're going to arc up for... And then we're going to come in because those back legs bend backwards. So he's standing on this leg too. And I'm going to do a little hoof at the bottom, a little sharp kind of square shape at the bottom.
Can you get the sausage for me, please?
All right, so here we go with a little hoof and that knee going backwards. Now in the back, we also have the knee going backwards from the leg that's farthest away from us here. And I'm going to pick that one up just a little bit, like this. So my deer is standing on just two legs. Just standing on two legs. I'm going to make just a little tiny hoof. So if you already did your legs, you can take a look at it and see if you added hooves. Because you can always add those little hooves on there. Now my deer is not quite done because they have those cute little tails. When they're running, their tails stick straight up when they're jumping. But mine is just standing there looking at us. So I'm just going to add, and the tail looks a lot like the ear. It's kind of a little round, elongated lump on the end. The shadow of the deer, because the deer also has a shadow. If our deer doesn't have a shadow, I mean, it's just kind of air. So we want to determine, are all of its legs touching the ground? Or are some of its legs touching the ground? So for me, my two legs that are more straight are touching the ground, but the two that are bent are not touching the ground. A couple more minutes, Thomas. So my favorite step of peeling off this tape. Let's see. Tape is on there pretty good. There we go. Check it out. I love it. So that by itself, we can already see the trees, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about light source again. The light source is in the middle, which means that the outside of the trees is the dark part. So I'm going to go to my flat paintbrush, and I'm going to pick up with my flat paintbrush, I'm going to pick up some of that brown. We haven't really used much brown yet. And some of that black and some of that white. Brown, black, and white. And then using my flat paintbrush, I'm going to go on the outside of the tree so that my paintbrush mimics the tree. And I'm just going to pull it in. Just like that. So I touch the outside and then I just kind of pull and flick. Just little tiny pulls in. And I'm going to go back and forth between white and gray. Sorry, we're mixing gray. White and black and brown. Okay? So outside of the tree and just pull it in. And as you pull it in and as you keep switching between those three colors, it's going to very naturally create the bark of an aspen tree. I'm going to finish this one tree while I'm on it because the very, very last step is just to take a tiny bit of black on your brush and just do little tiny knots.
I have a question.
Yes, how can I help you?
Are the trees the last step?
The trees are the last step. And so it creates that round texture. So I'm going to bring some more brown in. I'm going to bring some more white in. And I'm just going to keep flicking all the way in on the outside of the trees. So I did one of the trees. I'm doing the second tree now on one side. I'm going to go ahead and do a tree on the other side so you can see how that turns out. So going back and forth between white and brown and black. White and brown and black. You can start at the top or the bottom of the tree. It's your choice. Just the edge of the tree and flick it in. Flick it towards the middle. Away at all these trees over here. So fairly, a great way to get your brush fairly dry is to just kind of like wipe it on your palette. All right, so we're just wrapping up all these trees. I have 1.5 more trees over on the side. I just keep flicking back and forth between white and brown and black. Excellent. And so every time I finish a tree, I'm going to go ahead and add the dots in right then. You can add the dots whenever you want. There we go. And I have one last tree. And this tree goes all, my tree, I don't know about your last tree, but my tree goes all the way around the edge. So I'm going to have to wrap it around the edge. Let's see, that's a lot of brown. So I'm going to add some black in. And I'm going to have to flick some white in there too. And because it's on the edge, I'm going to wrap it all the way around to the side. Right, so I need to make all my little flicking motions over here too. Do, 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 do. So go ahead and go all the way up.